Mercedes built a 40 horsepower advantage. And Red Bull just found the rule that can delete it. Overnight. Because right now, Red Bull looks lost. 6th in the standings. Just 16 points after 3 races. A car so unstable. Verstappen called it impossible to drive. But here's what nobody saw coming. That problem is exactly what unlocks the solution. Because under FIA rules, if your engine has a structural limitation, you are allowed to fix it mid-season, legally. And Red Bull's engine is not just down on power. It's inconsistent, unstable, losing performance when the battery drops. Which means this isn't development. It's correction. And that changes everything. Because while Mercedes is completely locked, Red Bull is about to gain up to 25 horsepower. At the exact moment the season gets serious. And if they combine that with a stable car and a driver like Verstappen finally in control, Mercedes doesn't just lose an advantage. They lose the one thing that made them untouchable. At first, this doesn't look like an opportunity. It looks like a complete failure. Because nothing about Red Bull's start makes sense. 3 races, 16 points, 6th in the championship, behind their own junior team, using the exact same engine. That's not just bad. That's alarming. Because when a top team falls behind like that, there's usually one clear reason. A weak engine. A bad chassis. A fundamental mistake. But Red Bull's situation is different. Because the data doesn't point to one problem. It points to something much more complex. A combination of issues. All connected. The weight. 15 to 20 kilograms over the limit. Costing up to 0.6 per lap on its own. The balance. Changing every lap. Depending on battery level. Making the car unpredictable. Impossible to trust. And the energy system. Too aggressive. Too inconsistent. Switching between deployment and recovery. In a way that literally shifts the car's balance mid-corner. Now here's the key detail. Most teams would see this as 3 separate problems. 3 different areas to fix. 3 different development paths. But Red Bull doesn't. Because for them, this is one system. One core issue. One behavior. That connects everything. The way energy is delivered. Because that's where everything meets. Engine. Balance. Grip. Control. And that's exactly the area the FIA rule allows them to modify. Not to gain performance, but to fix instability. And that distinction changes everything. Because if Red Bull proves that this unpredictable behavior comes from the power unit system, they don't just get permission to adjust it. They get freedom to redesign how the car delivers power, how it transitions, how it behaves under load. And once that happens, all 3 problems start to collapse at the same time. The balance stabilizes. The driver gains confidence. The tires last longer. And the performance that was already there finally becomes usable. Lap after lap. Now connect that to Mercedes. Because their advantage right now is built on stability, clean power delivery, predictable behavior. They know exactly what the car will do in every phase of the lap. And that's how they control races. But the moment Red Bull fixes their system, that advantage is no longer unique. Because now, Red Bull doesn't just have potential. They have control. And when you combine control with an aggressive concept, with a driver like Verstappen. That's when things become dangerous. Because now, you're not chasing performance anymore. You're releasing it. And that's exactly what this rule allows Red Bull to do. Not build something new, but unlock something that was already there. Hidden. Waiting. For the exact moment where the rules finally allow it. But here's where this stops being about solving problems and starts becoming a direct threat to Mercedes. Because until now, everything has been predictable. Mercedes arrives at the straight, deploys more power, pulls away, controls the race. That pattern has defined the entire start of the season. And when something repeats like that, teams build confidence around it. They depend on it. They design their entire race around it. But Red Bull is about to remove that pattern. Completely. Because the moment they activate this correction, the straight is no longer a safe zone for Mercedes. It becomes a question. Because now, they don't know if the power gap is still there. They don't know if they can pull away. They don't know if Red Bull will stay behind, or suddenly stay with them. And that uncertainty is where everything starts to break. Now think about what Red Bull is really doing. They are not just fixing the engine. They are removing Mercedes' reference point. The one thing that defines how they race. Because right now, everyone knows how to fight Red Bull. Stay close in the corners. Wait for the straight. Attack. Simple. Effective. Predictable. But remove that moment, and everything changes. Because now, Red Bull becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability in Formula One is more dangerous than raw speed. Because you can prepare for speed. You cannot prepare for behavior you don't understand. But here's where it goes even deeper. Because this correction doesn't arrive alone. It connects with everything else Red Bull is already fixing. The weight reduction. The new floor. The improved balance window. All designed to work together at the same time. So when the engine becomes stable, the entire car evolves with it. Grip improves. Tire degradation drops. Confidence rises. And suddenly, the RB22 is not just faster on the straights. It's better everywhere. And that's when the shift becomes real. Because Mercedes is not losing one advantage. They are losing the foundation of their control. And once that foundation disappears, everything becomes harder. Strategy becomes riskier. Overtakes become uncertain. Defending becomes stressful. And stress creates mistakes. But here's the most important detail. Red Bull doesn't need to dominate immediately. They don't need to be clearly faster. They only need to remove the difference. Because once the gap is gone, everything else they've built starts to matter. The aggressive concept, the dynamic behavior, the raw potential, all of it finally usable. And that's when the balance flips. Not slowly. Instantly. Because the moment Red Bull proves that Mercedes can no longer escape on the straight, the entire grid sees it. The entire paddock feels it. And Mercedes knows it. Which leads to the final realization before everything unfolds. Because if Red Bull planned this, if they identified the flaw early, if they built the solution around this rule, then this was never about chasing Mercedes. It was about timing. Waiting for the exact moment where one legal correction doesn't just close the gap, but removes the one advantage that made Mercedes untouchable. And this is where everything finally comes together. Because what Red Bull is about to do is not just close the gap. It's changed the direction of the season. In one move. Because think about how rare this is in Formula One. Performance doesn't usually jump. It evolves. 1/10. Then another. Slow progress. Predictable development. But this is different. Because Red Bull is not adding performance step by step. They are removing a limitation. And when you remove a limitation, you don't gain a tenth. You unlock everything that was being held back. At once. Now imagine the exact moment this happens. One race weekend. No warning. No gradual signs. The car goes out. And from the first lap, it behaves differently. The balance holds. The rear stays stable. The energy delivery is smooth. And for the first time this season, Verstappen doesn't hesitate. He commits. Fully. And when a driver like him commits, the lap time doesn't improve slightly. It drops. Because all that hidden performance finally becomes real. Now here's the part that changes everything for Mercedes. Because they won't see it coming in the data. They won't predict it in simulations. They will feel it. On track. In real time. Because suddenly, the Red Bull behind them doesn't fall back on the straight. It stays there. Lap after lap. Closer. More consistent. More threatening. And that's when the realization hits. Not in a meeting. Not in the garage. On track. At full speed. The advantage is gone. And once the realization appears, everything changes inside the team. Because now, they are no longer managing a gap. They are defending position. And defending is a completely different mindset. Because control disappears. Confidence drops. Decisions become reactive. And that's when mistakes start to happen. Small ones at first. A late braking. A compromised line. A strategy call that comes too early. Or too late. And Red Bull doesn't need to force anything. They just need to stay there. Apply pressure. Wait. Because when a dominant team loses its reference point, it doesn't collapse instantly. It cracks. Then it breaks. And that's the moment Red Bull has been building toward. Not just to catch Mercedes, but to replace them. Because once that first race confirms it, once the gap is truly gone, there is no reset. No easy response. No quick solution. Just a new reality. Where Red Bull is no longer the team chasing, but the team everyone else is trying to understand. And that leads to the final truth. Because if all of this started with one rule, one interpretation, one opportunity inside the regulations, then this entire story was never about being slower. It was about being ready. Ready for the exact moment where the rules allow you to turn a weakness into the move. That changes everything. And when that moment arrives, it won't feel like Red Bull caught Mercedes. It will feel like something much more unsettling. Like the advantage that defined the season was never permanent. It was just waiting for Red Bull to take it away.